Okay, now we're ready to make a big shift to something, if anything, harder than worldhood, if you could imagine such a thing. And that's being in. And Heidegger says that he's been doing the worldhood up to now, and now meaning, let's go to where we are. After the one, which I take it we finished, we get on page 169 to being in as such. I used to think that was just sort of nice that he had divided it up that way, but not think that any big deal serious thing was happening. It took me ages to realize that this is a crucial moment in being in time, because worldhood is definitely easy to understand as public and shared. So in the familiarity of all of us finding our way around in our familiar world and in our familiar rooms, that it doesn't seem, it seems relatively easy to knock out Descartes' idea that we're each a private self with our own private world, and that, in a sense, to put a slogan, that my world is more basic and prior to the world, which is the Cartesian view, as I keep saying, right up through Husserl and Sartre, and I think Searle. But what's interesting is when you switch to being in, you switch to the phenomenon, which is really most on Descartes' side. That is, it's hard, and this is what we're going to be talking about today. I'm just sort of leaping ahead to tell you what I think is the really interesting thing that I've been worrying about all morning. I mean, when you think about being in, you think first, and that's what we're going to do today, about mood. And when you think about mood, that seems to be private. If ever there was an example of something going on in you, you think it might well be mood. So Heidegger's really going to run up against the phenomenon that will be one of the most troubling. I think we'll get there today. And he has a very interesting way to deal with it. But before we do that, we have to do something even more general and harder. What being in is basically about is the obvious phenomenological fact, which I've been trying to deny up to now, and which you all must have dimly sensed something is sort of missing in all this talk about the world, and what about my world, and what's important is that we're in the world in some particular situation, that we experience the world from some particular point of view. So in some sense, Dasein is in the world, and that's what we've been talking about, but there's another way in which it's in its world, and that's what we now have to talk about. But we have to talk about it in some way that doesn't end up with a whole lot of monad-like subjects, each one of them having their world playing inside of them, so to speak. Leibniz, with his view of monads, is the extremist view of that. Each of us is a self-contained world. As Leibniz famously said, monads, which are his version of subjects, have no windows. Everything goes on inside of them. So now I'm just going to plunge in and start talking about the phenomenon that Heidegger has to deal with, and that is the being in. He starts out, and that's why I warn you, the next few pages are very, very hard. He starts out very abstractly, trying to describe the general characteristic of the being in of Dasein. And so we start on 171. Just to orient you, there's now going to be two stages, so to speak. No, not two stages, two aspects of the being in. And one of them is what the translation calls state of mind. I'm at the bottom of 171. And the other one is what the German rightly calls understanding, and Heidegger calls understanding. But what Heidegger means by understanding isn't what one normally means. But that's for next time. Right now, we're going to start with talking about what the translation unfortunately calls state of mind. And a one which might seem sort of crazy, crotchety point, but which is not so crazy, is to get something straight at the bottom. Heidegger says state of mind and understanding. That is, he puts them in that order. That's important because later state of mind is going to turn out to be related to the past and understanding to the future. And he takes up, naturally, state of mind before he takes up understanding. All that I wouldn't harp on if it wasn't important in the second division to straighten out some confusion about it. For us right now, we're going to do what Heidegger does and what the translation misses, start with state of mind and get them. And now the question is, what is state of mind? Or why is that a bad translation of what Heidegger's talking about and calling state of mind? Well, the German word is Befindlichkeit. You might think, well, good, let's just translate it, and we'll have the right thing. But unfortunately, it's not a word in German. So it's going to be hard to figure out what the equivalent English word is. You won't find it in the dictionary. Befindlichkeit. If you took it apart, this would be how you find yourself. And this is, Keit is always ness. So it's John Hoagland, who has a great sense of the sort of literalness of translation and no sense of what sounds okay in English, says you should translate this so foundness. That would be as literal as that's what it says. It's about how, the ness of how you find yourself. But there is an expression in German that has got to do with this, which you can ask somebody, wie befinden Sie sich? How's it going with you? How are you doing? And it's out of that befinden, finding. How do you find yourself? Meaning, how's it going with you? That he's making up this, Heidegger's making up this word. And in the 60s, in the hippie days, I thought this was where you're atness. I think that's about as close as you can get. Then this turns out to be where you're atness, and understanding turns out to be what you're into. And that is, things were clearer in the 60s and 70s. Now we have to struggle with it. And what are we going to do? Well, the best way I tried in my commentary, as those of you who look at the commentary know, to come up with a word for this. And it has to do with the way we are thrown into things and affected by things. So I call it affectedness. Well, that's not wrong, but it makes it sound snooty or something. It's got the wrong connotations if you just pay attention to the English. So I take it back. When I do the second edition of the commentary, which I keep promising, I wouldn't say that. One of my students, I forget which one, translates it disposition. That's better. But the trouble with disposition is that already has a meaning in English, and it's like having a good disposition or a bad disposition or something. And that's not bad, except it's not abstract enough. So now I just think we have to say disposed. That's no great, I'm not proud of it. I'm ready to give it up for anything except so foundness. So this is disposedness. That's how you should translate it, unless you can think of some better way to do it. Yeah, Dave. The trouble is, that might be okay. I'd have to think about it a bit. That's what it's trying to say, all right. It's situatedness, but, why do I think doesn't feel right to me? Yeah. Good. Yeah. Eugene is right. It's how it's going with you. You can think of that as situatedness, but mostly you think of that as being here. Of course, in a way that what fits with what Dave said is we plunge right into Dasein being it's here, or there, or both. We're going to have to talk about that in a minute. But what I was resisting is that it's no secret, I hope, if you've been doing the reading, that the most basic, the natural example of Befindlichkeit is mood. And somehow mood, again, sort of tells you how it's going with you. We're back to that again, more than what looks like your situation. But keep it in mind. I mean, maybe that's the right thing. I don't know. What's problematic is, besides the fact that there is no such word in German. Heidegger had to make it up out of this "Wie befinden Sie sich" idiom. But this is supposed to be very abstract. It's the most general name for really how you're disposed, how it's going with you, how you sense your situation, and all of that is supposed to be most concrete in mood. But he wants to go up a level of abstraction from mood, and then you don't quite know which word picks out that abstraction. So he made up this abstraction, and maybe you just have to get used to it. Let's look at it the other way. What's wrong with state of mind? See if anybody here has a reaction to that. Of course, there's a way of hearing state of mind, normal way, which makes it not too bad, but there's still something wrong with it. What's wrong with it? Sounds a lot like what? Subject. Yes, it sounds like our mind. It sounds like something that maybe Searle could worry about in his big distinction between mind and world. So, and it sounds like we're looking into we're going to say something about the mind, which is going to be self-contained and inner, and that would be very misleading. So mind is one of those words like subject, which has been taken over by, introduced by Descartes, and then sort of taken over by everybody, subject anyway. I take it the word mind was probably already around. But you have less of a feel for what's wrong with state of, I imagine. But objects have states. They can be hot or cold or such. That's a kind of physical term for something to be in a certain state. So you've got the worst of both worlds. You seem to have, the translators have brilliantly managed to find an idiom which is both misleading on the mind side and misleading on the state side, as if they had a little bit of the res cogitans in there with mind and a bit of the res extensa in there having states, like a gravitational state. And so throw it out. And whenever you see it, change it in your mind, or even write a different thing in your text, and when you write a paper, just fix it. I remember I keep saying that. It drives me crazy to read papers which are generally pretty good, with quotes that are generally got hopeless translations in them. Okay, now, we looked at the bottom of 171. That's the two things he's going to talk about when he talks about being in. And the first one he's going to do is the state of mind, that is the Befindlichkeit, one, and we're starting with that on 172, but I wanted to say one thing about 169 before we go any further into it. This is just saying what I said, but I always feel that I have to show you where the text says what I said, partly so you can understand the text, partly so you can believe me, or challenge me. Anyway, on 169, about 5 lines down right at the beginning, where it says, right at the end of page 130 in the German, up till now, our phenomenal characterization of being in the world has been directed toward the world's the structural item of being in, and then skipping down to the next paragraph about 10 lines in. Now, keeping in mind what has been achieved in the concrete analysis of the world and the who, we must turn our interpretation to the phenomenon of being in. That's just what I've been saying. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that at 170, this is all sort of background, warming up to plunge into something which is going to bang your head in a minute. About 20 lines down on 170, you hear him saying something which is important about his method, that it's part of what he rejects in the whole philosophical tradition, that you should be asking yourself, which is more basic, the understanding or mood, to put it in that way. And just like it's wrong to ask which is more basic, the present at hand or the ready to hand. In some sense, the present at hand is important. That's causal underlying. In some other sense, the ready to hand is more basic as intelligible. And he's going to not take sides here either at the end of the top paragraph. If either, he says, we're going to do fundamental ontology, he says in italics, and he's going to talk about the characteristics of the phenomenon. And then he says if these characteristics of the phenomena, that is, show themselves, then existentially they're equiprimordial. That's all I just want to stress. The phenomenon of equiprimordiality, of constitutive items, has often been disregarded in ontology because of a methodologically unrestrained tendency to derive everything and anything from some simple primal ground. And it's not Heidegger's way of doing that. Of course, it just occurs to me, I wasn't going to say this, but now that it occurs to me, I feel I have to say it. There is a certain sense in which he is doing that. That may be one reason why he gives up on being in time. Fundamental ontology, as which he's just mentioned above, is, I wonder if we read these two together. Is he trying to tell me something? Because it would look like fundamental ontology is looking for the primal ground. It's looking for that being on the basis of which everything else becomes intelligible, the source of all meaning and so forth. And then he would say, the mood is part of that, and understanding is part of that. Let's read the intervening part. I don't know what I've gotten into here. The book is going to do fundamental ontology. Consequently, if we inquire about being in as our theme, we cannot indeed consent to nullify the primordial character of this phenomenon by deriving it from others, that is, so forth, breaking it up and so forth. But the fact that something primordial is underivable does not rule out the possibility that a multiplicity of characteristics of being may be constitutive for it. If these show themselves, then existentially they are equiprimordial. That's what I said. So I don't know, but it's the part at the end of, so let's go on. Fine, they're equiprimordial. That's no problem. And the phenomena of equiprimordiality has been disregarded in ontology because an unrestrained tendency to derive everything and anything from some simple primal ground. And he's putting that right after he says we're doing fundamental ontology, which means we are studying the being who gives meaning to all the modes of being. We're going to find out what the mode of being of Dasein is that makes the being of the ready to hand, the being of the present at hand, the being of Dasein, all possible, and in the end, what gives them all a unity, which is no secret, is temporality. So why is he thinking that he's not falling back into the primal ground issue? I don't know. Maybe he'll discover later that he is and stop writing Being in Time and burn the last division. Yes?
When he says writing this those creates being of intelligibility, that way people understand the world, but then he allows the present depends on causally fitting into being and what.
Good. I like that. That's right. Let me put it in a more dramatic way that we haven't got there yet. If he believes in the reality of the physical universe, which I think he does, he thinks that he's not deriving everything from Dasein. The sentence I keep repeating, which we're going to get to eventually, being depends on us, but beings don't. That's a sort of anti-traditional ontological question. It drives people crazy. What could he mean by that? And it takes a lot of explaining. But one thing he certainly means by that is that you could just take away Dasein and there'd still be electrons and galaxies and so forth. Thank goodness. And that's what your ontology, even your fundamental ontology, which is about being, had better be concerned with. Where being means intelligibility, and intelligibility means depends on us. You can't get from there to the fact that everything out there that we find intelligible depends on us and our finding it intelligible. We'll get back to that. The other thing that crossed my mind is what he says about the primitives. That again, he's not driven by the ontological imperative to show that the kinds of being that he's talking about are the only kinds of being. And therefore, and he's not trying to have a complete system, so to speak. Presumably he thinks that if you did understand the primitives, you'd find that they had another mode of being, and presumably it would be still back to fundamental ontology. But He's open about it. That's good. That's an important thing. Yeah.
Ontology wasn't initially but something much relevant. If you contemplate French language development, right? Initially, it didn't look like it's class, but when it was fundamental ontology, God, one being. But initially, the way I did it, fundamental ontology is something like any ontology of all regional ontology.
Well, okay. I mean, you don't try too hard to understand what Dave is saying, or Tyler, because it's things about, but I'll say one thing in response to that. Yes, the move to explain all being in terms of Dasein and the mode of being of Dasein, which is finally temporality, is a move that Heidegger makes after he seems to be looking for something broader, and a broader understanding of being than intelligibility to us. And he goes back to that broader thing, and you could consider this whole being in time, which is so full of interesting, important observations and phenomena, I hope you realize, even if he gives up on this big claim that this is, that you go back to understand us, you'll understand the basis of all forms of being. He may decide that this has been too limited. I think you're right. And I think he sort of was heading a certain way and then got sidetracked into this and then went back to thinking about, well, how do I want to put the last thing? That even if being depends on us, there may be something even more basic than being that doesn't, is how it comes out later. But that's later Heidegger. So let's not talk about that. Let's, you want to say something? Yeah.
Being simultaneously already, so it doesn't exclude step the multiplicity of different quantum characters being.
From some primal ground, so derive everything from some primal ground. Well, he certainly doesn't do it, even in being in time, and he does it even less and less. That's all. This is a sidetrack that I didn't expect to be on. Let's go back. So all we're doing now is just laying out what he's up to. He's got two equally primordial dimensions of the in to talk about, and they are, remember, mood and understanding. And he's going to talk about mood, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And now, the inness is what we want to talk about next. And so we're going to analyze these two very difficult paragraphs on 171 and 172, but 171 really is all of it. The two difficult paragraphs on that page. I feel I ought to try to explain what's going on, though I also feel I'm never sure what's going on. But keep your eye on the ball, and the ball is he talking? He's talking about somehow how Dasein can be in the world, having somehow its own world, and yet always having the one shared world. I mean, that's the problem he's got to face as he makes this transition from worldhood to being in, and he does this transition abstractly on 171. It's a lot easier to see how he deals with it concretely when you get to mood as a phenomenon and understanding. But here it is, for what it's worth. Try to figure it out. If you could figure it out better than I can, write me a paper. So it's something. I'm just going to read. The entity at the top of 171, bottom issue of 132 in the German. Top of 171, the entity which is essentially constituted by being in the world is in italics, which I don't understand why, is itself in every case, it's there. I think the is means that's referring to the fact that it takes a stand on its being. It takes a stand on its being. That's how it is. That's its way of being. That's existence. And I think that's part of the solution is, just keep this in mind, the Dasein has to use the public world, because one is what one does, and what one does needs to be all the roles and all the equipment that's there. Dasein has to be itself in its own unique way by using all this public stuff. In the background, I think, that's part of the important move he's making. So maybe that's why the is underlined. It's there. According to the familiar significance of the word, the there points to a here and a yonder. So here and there. Now this is going to get messy. The here of the I here is always understood in the relation of a yonder, ready to hand. That makes sense. Here, and then there's the chairs you can sit in and the briefcase and all that that's further and further over there. Where are we? The here of the I here is always understood in relation to a yonder ready to hand, in the sense of a being towards this yonder, a being which is, what are we going to say, de-distancing, directional, and concernful. He's just summing up there. Dasein's existential spatiality, which thus determines its location, is itself grounded in being in the world. Those two sentences are about the spatiality chapter. The yonder belongs definitely to something encountered within the world, underlined. All these mysterious italics, that means that we're still talking about worldhood. Here and yonder are possible only in a there. Boy, now what does that mean? I thought yonder was the there, I used to think when I read it. So how can here and there be possible only in a there? That's the first shocker. Well, that's because there's another meaning to there. There's a kind of there which points away. That's the yonder there. But there's a there that names the situation. There I was lecturing about Heidegger. From your point of view, there I was in the Heidegger lecture. That's the same there. It's not a yonder there. It's the whole situation. So there's a there which is the whole situation. And in it, you can have the here and yonder. It's structurally similar to the de-distancing, which gives you the whole near and far business. And in it, you can have things that are near or far. De-distancing isn't near or far. So here so that's what he's doing again. It certainly is confusing, but it's ordinary language. Here and yonder are possible in a there. That is, where a there is ambiguous, whether it means a lot of different theirs or only one there. I don't think he's told you yet. There ought to be something like the there and my there running around, but we haven't got to them. Here and yonder are possible only in a there, that is to say, only if there is an entity which has made a disclosure of spatiality in the being of the there. So that's the kind of there that he just introduced. That's the situation. The entity carries in its own most being the character of not being closed off. That's okay. In the expression there, we have in view this essential disclosedness. By reason of this disclosedness, this entity, together with the being there of the world, is there for itself. He is making it as hard as possible. What does that mean? Well, there's the being there of the world, and that's again refers to the first section of the book. We know about the being there of the world. There's one world, and we're all in it, and that's that. And now we got the other side of it, the inside of it. The entity is there for itself. That means that it has to take a stand on its own being. Sometimes Heidegger, when he's talking about the most basic characteristic of Dasein, I'll show it to you when we get to the anxiety chapter, he talks about it as that it is and has to be. That is, there is this kind of being which, when it is, has to take a stand on its being, and therefore is to be there for itself. It'll have to be somehow in the world. I mean, don't think this is very illuminating. I'm just doing it because I feel I have to, and every year try to get it straighter. When we get to the move, which we'll get to in a minute, you'll get your feet on the ground. Yeah.
But this part right here is that
Yes. Yes.
Finds itself having.
Why do you say, I like it, but why do you think that's Okay.
Whereas here, therefore, that you have to do that. You cannot not do that.
Okay.
That it's the sort of thrown in,
Yeah, it's got to do with thrownness. That's the that it is, and that it has to be is the understanding part, and that it is thrownness in this situation in which it has to take a stand on itself. That's what he's trying to get at with it's there. Okay, let's go on. Or maybe I don't have to go on. Let's see. I gotta see if I have to go on. Well, yeah, we have to go on to the next little paragraph on 171, and then I'll give up sort of, or hope that we've done it. When we talk in an ontical figurative way of the lumen naturale, the natural light, which somebody like Locke talks about, in man, we have in mind nothing other than Heidegger has in mind nothing other than the existential ontological structure of this entity, that it is in such a way as to be it's there. I take it that means, again, he's just repeating it, that it has to take a stand on its own being, and then it'll be its there. That'll be its way of being in the world. To say that it is illuminated means that as being in the world, it is cleared in itself, and I want to skip a little bit, in such a way that it is itself the clearing. That's probably the most obscure of all the sentences of this bunch of obscure sentences. What is this, the clearing, coming in here? The clearing is another word for the space that Dasein discloses. I don't mean spatial space now. I mean opening up a world in which you can encounter things in other Daseins. That one of Heidegger's names for this is the clearing. And Dasein is opening up in its activity a clearing, is what he's saying here. Later, that term he likes a lot, and he writes it all over the place. It's very rare in Being and Time. But now let's try it again. That as being in the world, it's cleared in itself in such a way that it is the clearing. Boy, lots of weird things happen very fast there. And there's a footnote, which is not much help. He says openness, clearing, light, and so forth. Later he'll call this the open sometime. Well, I've got a way to put this, but I don't know whether it's illuminating or not, and I don't know whether it's right or not, but it might be helpful to think about it this way. That what he wants to say is each Dasein is its own activity of opening up a space or a clearing in which things in Dasein can be encountered. And each of us has to do our own clearing. That's how when we get ourselves assigned to a role and do things. But when we do that the activity of clearing, which is us, we open up a shared clearing. And then I'm trying to give you a kind of useful metaphor. If you're in the woods cutting down trees, which is what Heidegger says he means when he talks about the clearing, is the space left when some trees have been cut down and hauled away. You're doing the clearing, where the clearing means the activity of cutting down the trees, but you're making a shared public clearing. I don't know if that helps at all, but if that's the picture he has, and I think that sentence is saying it, I'm not sure. So let's go on to the end of that paragraph. Only for an entity which is existentially cleared in this way, which is that which is present at hand, can become accessible, and you could say and ready to hand. He doesn't. But you could become accessible in the light or hidden in the dark. That is, once you've opened up the world, once you've turned the light on for everything, that's the lumen naturale. That's the clearing is related to light, he says. Once you sort of turn the light on, then things can be in the light or in the dark. It's that same move again of once you de-distance, you can get near and far. What did I say the next one was? The one we're getting today, how did I put it? What? Yeah, that's right. Only in the shared there, like there they were in the Heidegger course, is there a here and a yonder. And now he's saying only in the shared opening or lighting up of everything, can there be dark and light? It's a Heidegger way of thinking. Now, I think I will almost stop. Let's see a little further. Only for the entity which is existentially cleared in this way, so-and-so, is there dark, is there hidden and light. By its very nature, Dasein brings its there along with it. See, he's got somehow moved from the there to Dasein, it's there, and he has to do that because he wants to talk about being in. If it lacks its there, it is not factically the entity which Dasein essentially is. It is not an entity at all. Dasein is its disposedness. That's the punchline. Dasein is the there, and it is also its there. And that's it. It's just very hard. And, no, I've got to go a little further. It doesn't help any, though, but I can't resist. Okay, skip a sentence and then Dasein is its disposedness means at the same time that the being which is an issue for this entity in its very being is to be its there. That's what I've been trying to lead up to. Somehow Dasein has to take a stand on its being, and when it does it's got to be it's there. But now skipping to the next paragraph. This chapter in which we shall undertake the explication of being in is such, that is to say, of the being of the there, breaks into two parts. Now, I don't know whether that the is just a general term for a lot of its theirs, but I hope not. I think that he's constantly trying to say this very hard thing and never saying it very clear or very well, I'm afraid, that Dasein is the kind of being which is always open to a shared world from a point of view, or always acting in such a way as to find out who it is by using all sorts of stuff which isn't it, and so forth and so forth. But I think that's all we can do with that. I'm just going to look at my notes. Yeah, at this point, so by being it's there, Dasein is open to the clearing. That's my bottom line on the subject. Only I say, look at my own commentary on 165 for some illuminating quotes. Yeah, I collected the quotes which seem to say something like this in various other places, which I'll just read to you. He says, the surrounding world is different in a certain way for each of us, and notwithstanding that, we move about in a common world. That's from Basic Problems 164. I mean, just to show that I haven't been making up this problem. Thus, Heidegger can say, Dasein is cleared in itself in such a way that it is itself the clearing. Or something that he can say with respect to time, in the part we're not going to read, but is the clearest, because it's the extremist. Although each one of us utters his own now, it is nevertheless the now for everyone. I mean, all that is the same point. Okay, now I am ready to turn, which is much more fun and much more graspable, to the phenomenon. So, eat your power bar or whatever you need to stay awake. I know this is a hard time to keep from, but maybe we should have a power bar break at about this point in the course. And we're ready to plunge into the phenomenon. Then why do I go back? Just a second. I'm probably not going to read this. Yeah, I don't want to read that. I'm going to read this to myself because I don't know whether I've said it any better in my writing here than what I said just now until I read it carefully. So I guess I can just say, then of course, you see what he's opposing. I'm not a stream of private perspectival views. I've got to act in this shared world. It's not that I've got an inner sense to talk like Kant. It's not that each person has his own world, as in Husserl and Sartre. You've got your own, you've got your world, its world, but where its world means somehow a way of taking up the public world. I keep trying to say it over and over. I'm absorbed in coping with equipment and with others, and therefore absorbed in my situation. And my situation gives me a perspective on the world. When I use my disclosing power, I disclose the same world you disclose. So now, finally, we get to disposedness. And I've explained already why I'm going to call it disposedness and not state of mind. And he covers, notion of disposedness covers moods like fearfulness. It covers the way things matter to us, like being afraid of something specific. It's a very broad notion. But the main kind of mood he's interested in is not being directed towards something specific, like being afraid of a snake or being afraid of snakes. It's being in a timorous, frightened mood. That is the main thing what he's interested in when he talks about mood, is that it's some kind of holistic background again, on the basis of which directed toward things as mattering to us becomes possible. So if we've got this overall feeling of timorousness and so forth, then directing ourselves towards snakes as threatening becomes possible. And it's the background that he's interested in, and he thinks that's the primordial phenomenon of mood. So, and moods deliver us over to something, to them. So that's the next move. The interesting thing, the first thing, why have moods here at this piece where he's got two things, Befindlichkeit, that is disposedness and understanding? Well, it's no secret that he's setting up a temporal structure. And mood has got to do with what we are always already in a mood, as he would say, that we are thrown into moods. We don't get to choose the mood that we're in, and we can't just get out of it by deciding we don't like it and wanting to be in some other mood. In fact, he says, moods settle in. I won't jump ahead to find the quote. What that means is that if you're in a grumpy mood, then everything looks annoying. And it makes you even more grumpy, which makes everything look even more annoying. And if you're in an optimistic and upbeat mood, everything looks like an opportunity and a challenge and maybe fun and enjoyable, and that makes things even more opportunities and fun and enjoyable, and you get pulled into that mood. And so moods can dominate you and settle in, and you are always in a mood, and you just are thrown into that mood. You're at the mercy of moods. He says the only way you can control moods at all is by bringing in another mood. I take that to mean, like, if you're really grumpy and depressed, you could try going to a party that's lots of fun. However, probably that's just going to be annoying too. And but that's the phenomena he wants to talk about. And so moods are going to be the way we're delivered over, as he puts it on 174. The first full paragraph. The German is the top of 136. He says, look at that. Maybe there's something interesting that I've skipped. It's the very top of 174. I don't know what it's going to say yet, but it looks interesting. Onto-existentialtem Dasein is, for the most part, evades the being which is disclosed in the mood. In an ontological existential sense, this means that even in that to which such a mood pays no attention, Dasein is unveiled in its being delivered over to the there. In the evasion itself, the there is always disclosed. I guess all I want to add there is, we've talked about the there. Now it turns out it's the moods that deliver us over, and throw us into, and keep us in the general there, which is our sense of the world, and our sense of what possibilities there are, and what we're up to, all the things that moods reveal. So then you get this business of that it is, which is important right next. This characteristic of Dasein's being, that it is veiled and it's whence and what? Veiled. I've corrected something. Veiled in its whence and whither, yet disclosed in itself all the more unveiledly. We call it thrownness. I've been using the term, but now we have to see where he starts using it. The thrownness of this entity into its there. Now we can understand that. Indeed, it is thrown in such a way that as being in the world, it is the there. Now, that's true too. We just keep getting this strange puzzle, but we're just getting to name it, and it's just the way it is. It's the phenomenon. The expression thrownness is meant to suggest the facticity of its being delivered over. That it is and has to be. I knew that was coming up. That's the bottom line about Dasein. Just there it is, thrown into the world, and it's got sort of one innate structure, namely that it's got to act in such a way as to take a stand on its being, and that's the sense in which it's delivered over. And he's defining facticity there at the bottom in italics. Facticity, and that's what he wants to talk about, not factuality. Facticity is not the factuality of a factum brutum, of something present at hand, but a characteristic of Dasein's being, one that has been taken up into existence, even if proximally it's been thrust aside. I think I may have given you an example already. You need something to keep in mind every time he does this facticity distinction, and that is being male and female. That's a factum brutum. That's just a present at hand property of organisms like us. But being masculine and feminine, that's what your culture takes up and gives a meaning to, and then you have to take up those categories and give your own meaning to them. You don't have to do it consciously, and you don't get a chance to do it altogether because your parents are already making little girls into little girls and little boys into little boys. But in general, your culture has a view about how little girls and little boys are supposed to be. That's its interpretation, and you have to take up, not, as I say, not thinking about it, but you take it up in your own way. Not every little girl takes up the way the culture wants little girls to be, and the same with boys. So that's the example to keep in mind. As I was talking, I just got struck by something I have to say, just for the record. Is that I got to go back to something. Maybe it's wrong, but it's interesting enough to go back for a minute. When I said that there was this structure in which you always get on the basis of which characteristic, and then you get what happens on the basis of it. I'm going to repeat it. So you got the spatiality of de-distancing, and on the basis of that, you've got near and far. You've got the lighting of the clearing, and on the basis of this, you've got hidden and lit up. What was the third one? You've got the there. Oh, yes, you've got the basic there that means the here, the situation there. And on the basis of that, you've got here and there, and yonder. You know what that is, I think? That's the distinction between the ontological and the ontic, or the existential and the existentiel. The ontological existential is always that on the basis of which, and then you get an existential ontic story about near and far, dark and light. I keep forgetting one of them. What am I missing this time? Near and far. Oh, the other kind of near and far, the distance kind you get on the basis of de-distancing, and the near and far in the sense of here and yonder that you get in the sense of, it's really kind of directional kind, I guess. Anyway, but I think that's interesting. I think that's just not any old structure. That's the whole way the book is supposed to work. You're supposed to always go back from the ontic existential to the ontological existential condition of the possibility of that. Or better, to talk like Heidegger, that you get the background. That's not Heidegger. Well, sometimes he says background, but usually you get the Vorauf hin. You get that on the basis of which these ontic existential things become possible, intelligible, and doable. Okay, that was for me almost, but if it turns out to be true, it's worth knowing. Now let's see. The moods settle in. I think that's really over here. So Dasein always has a mood, he says, about 10 lines down on 173. That might seem obvious, but it isn't obvious. And sometimes he says that. There's a place where in another lecture, I don't think I brought it with me, where he says the most obvious moods are the most hidden moods are the moods that just seem obvious, that you're in all the time and that you don't even notice that you're in, and that's the way moods are most powerful. They are always setting up your day and what you notice and what you try to do and what you don't try to do. That's the sense in which you're always in a mood, and as he says, even the pale, balanced mood and so forth is not nothing at all. And now, what do you learn from your mood? Somebody already said that. I said it, but somebody said it first. I think maybe it was Eugene. That a mood manifests how one is, or how one is faring, he says at the middle of 173. That's on 134 of the German. That is, at the end of that paragraph. A mood manifests how one is faring. In this, how one is, having a mood brings being to its there. See, now that's an important line to me, because remember I said that he's going to discuss phenomena that are most Cartesian seeming. And the fact that each of us have our there, each of us have our mood, each of us have our point of view, all of that is what the Cartesian would try to make the most of. And he's got to constantly say, our mood, our there, our world is always correlative with the world. We are like a perspective on the world. We are open to the world, but I'm open to the world from here, and you're open to the world from over there, and that's very important. Sometimes I tried the idea that it's like we're windows on the world. Each of us looking out through our window sees the same world, and we don't see the window. I mean, that's when it starts to look Cartesian, as if somehow we were all inside, and there wasn't any window, and we had to sort of figure out what was out. We had our internal representations, and we had to try to figure out what's out there. It's like this is this business of the clearing. It's we're looking out on the clearing, we're clearing the clearing, we're opening it, disclosing it, lighting it up, but from somewhere. That's the being in. Okay, I saw a hand, because I keep repeating these things, and I feel somebody has a different way to say it.
Regarding what we're talking about, but how is it that is any different than a bunch of minds having representation?
Oh, you're right. That's the right question, and at the right moment. Well, I'm heading into that. You have to be able to understand the phenomenon of moods in such a way that you can't assimilate it to a bunch of minds, each having its own representation of the world, or having on different colored glasses, you might think, or projecting different feelings onto the world as rosy or gray and so forth. That's just what we're heading toward. That's what I meant when I said that this is a very hard chapter, because that seems, if ever there seemed to be a condition in which there's something inner in you, namely your mood, and it's something inner in me, namely my mood, and I project on the world it's being annoying because I'm in a disgruntled mood, and you project on the world it's being challenging because you're in an upbeat challenge, occasion mood, opportunity mood. That's the way it has looked to every philosopher up to Heidegger, insofar as any philosopher even bothered to think about moods, which I think Heidegger says nobody did, except Aristotle a bit in talking in the rhetoric. So you're right. I mean, that's the problem, which Heidegger has an answer to, a very interesting answer, which gets him into more problems, which we will talk about as we get there. Where are we? Moods reveal how it's going with a particular Dasein. I said that. I'll just read one more sentence where I was. And having a mood Dasein is always disclosed mood-wise as that entity to which it has been delivered over in its being, and in this way it has been delivered over to the being which in existing it has to be. That's just more Heidegger talk for the moods tell you, moods are where you're at. That's what he's trying to say. And they perpetuate themselves. I said I didn't know where that was, but now we've got there. There he says that at the bottom of 175. The bare mood discloses the there more primordially. We'll get to the previous sentence in a minute. but correspondingly it closes off more stubbornly than any not perceiving. This is shown by bad moods. I've already given you the example, so I won't do it again. Let's see. And moods dispose the world in a primordial way. I think that's important, the very middle of 175. Ontologically, now we're going to talk about the way moods have this kind of background upon which character. Ontologically, mood is a primordial kind of being for Dasein, in which Dasein is disclosed to itself prior to all cognition and volition and beyond their range of disclosure. Sorry, that doesn't tell you about the upon which. I misthought. This is still about individual moods. Individual moods disclosed to individual Daseins, how it's going with them, in a way that's much more, I guess you could sort of say, reliable than how they reflectively think it's going with them, or how they wish it was going with them, or how they'd like other people to think it's going with them. I mean, what's really telling you how it's going with you, whether you like it or not, is your mood. That's what Heidegger says. But that's not facing his problem yet. We're getting there. Now, the next thing is, and now we are facing his problem, moods are not going to be inner, and they're not projected on the world. And that's not an argument yet. That's just what he's going to tell you he's not. He's against. The bottom of 175, bottom of 136 in German. Now, from the beginning of the paragraph, from what has been said, we can see already that disposedness is very remote from anything like coming across a psychical condition by the kind of apprehending which first turns around and then back. That's a very complicated way of saying reflection. That is, it is not the kind of inner state that you come about on reflection. That isn't to say that maybe sometime, under some conditions, you could. And Heidegger's going to keep that open. But right now he's telling you basically that's not what moods are doing. Indeed, it is so far from this that only because the there has already been disclosed in a disposedness can immanent reflection come across experiences at all. And remember, experiences with a capital E is Erlebnis, private. So immanent, so only because you stop just doing what you're doing and reflect on it can you discover that you've been in a disgruntled mood all along. That's what he's saying here. The bare mood discloses the there more primordially, but correspondingly closes it off. I read that. Okay. So I just read this one because I want it to be clear, and we'll come back to it, that just as Heidegger thinks that there is, well, I'm beginning the sentence without knowing where I know where I'm heading, but I don't know. Yes, the other mind things. Just as Heidegger thinks that there is a problem sometimes of knowing other minds when people are being weird and secretive or pretending to be somebody they aren't, like in Second Life or something, then you've got a problem about other minds. But normally you don't. Now he's saying the same thing here. You could have private psychological mood states. Heidegger's too good a phenomenologist and too smart a philosopher to just say outrageous things and leave the view he's against as sort of smashed. Heidegger never wants to smash the view he's against. He wants to sort of situate it, relativize it, localize it. Sure, sometimes there's a problem of other minds. In these very peculiar breakdown, unready-to-hand type conditions, you don't know what the other person's thinking, and you have to figure it out or try to feel it by empathy. Now he's saying, and I'll get to it later, there are conditions in which you can reflect and discover that there are moods in you, but that's not the normal thing. The normal thing, just to use the funny English expression that we're lucky to have, it's not that there are moods in me, but I'm in a mood. That's Heidegger's pick, which we're just about to get to now. To say that I'm in a mood is to say that it's like being in an atmosphere. I don't want to jump ahead. I'll get there in just a second, though. So it's not an psychological state. Yeah, we're ready just for that. I just read that now. And it's not projection. I just wanted to read that, because if it were a private state, so that I was sort of privately disgruntled, then we'd have the question, and how come the whole world looks gray to me? Well, that's easy. I project on it my disgruntlement. That's been insofar as anybody's had a view, the traditional view. It's also Sartre's view. I mean, since not very many people have had it, he's my favorite character for seemingly getting it wrong. I mean, the idea is, and psychologists have it by the dozens, that somehow or other we project our moods onto the world, but they're really in us. On 176, Heidegger says, and he just denies it, and about 10 lines down, after the italics. Well, I mean, let's do the italics. That's the ontological mood again. The mood has already disclosed in every case being in the world as a whole and makes it possible, first of all, to direct oneself towards something. It's that upon which you direct yourself. Having a mood, now, he says, he just asserts, is not related to the psychical in the first instance. That is, it's not first some private thing, and is not itself an inner condition, which then reaches forth in an enigmatical way and puts its marks on things and persons. That's a neat sentence. What that sentence says is moods are not private things that get projected onto things. Moreover, the crucial word is enigmatical, because what would that be? You just can't just solve the problem by saying you got this inner mood, but you project it on to the chairs. I'm disgruntled and I see X as annoying because I project my disgruntlement onto X and see X as annoying. What is that? That's just magic. Heidegger thinks that's not going to help any. And that sort of names the problem and gets rid of it without ever facing it. So how does Heidegger going to do it? Well, Heidegger thinks that moods are, and this is why I want to make sure and get there, which I have, and that's great, and I'm going to have to read from other places. He doesn't do much of the phenomenological description of mood in Being in Time. So I'm going to read to you about shared moods in my commentary on 171. And then from there, I'll tell you where he says it. You can look. Okay. That's in basic problems, I think. I have to go to the footnote to find out. What chapter are we in? Chapter 10. And it's footnote 3. No, it's in the fundamental concepts of metaphysics, which is, that's out too in English, and it's on page 66 of the fundamental principles of metaphysics, and here it is. I'm going to read it, and this is the basic phenomenon. Finally, we've got there, and I think you can get everything you need about mood that Heidegger's trying to make work out of that. This very neat, just simple description of what it's like to have moods. A person, as we say, is let's start again. As we say, well-disposed person brings a good mood to a group. In this case, does he produce in himself a psychic experience in order then to transfer it to the others, like the way infectious germs wander from one organism to another? I mean, he's just saying, whatever it is, when somebody's in a good mood, it makes the mood people into a good mood. We don't really understand that, and it's not going to help to say it sort of projects it over everybody. Or another person is in a group that in its manner of being, and another person is in a group that in its manner of being, it's a funny translation there, dampens and depresses everything. No one is outgoing. What do we learn from this? Moods are not accompanying phenomena, in italics. I don't know why bother the italics. Rather, they are the sort of thing that determines being with one another in advance. It seems as if, so to speak, the mood is in each case already there, like an atmosphere. I take that to be the crucial move. Moods are holistic, and their way of being is like an atmosphere. I'll explain that in a minute. In which we are steeped and by which we are thoroughly determined. It not only seems as if this were so, it is so. And in light of these facts, it's necessary to dispense with the psychology of feelings, experience, and I would say projection, and he says consciousness. Okay, what is it to say a mood is like an atmosphere? Well, it's to say that it's already there. You don't sort of bring it with you or produce it. You're always already in a mood. And now comes this move which he's making without making it explicit. There is your own private mood, and we'll get back to that. But generally, you're in a shared mood. I mean, the class, you can talk about the mood in the room. People who are business consultants and so forth do that. The mood in the room is this shared mood, which can be upbeat, like at a party that Heidegger talks about at the beginning. One group is upbeat, or it can be a shared downer or disgruntled, indifferent, whatever kind of mood. You are in it. And to say that it's like an atmosphere is to say that once you're in it, it colors everything that you see and do, and it can be, and usually is, this holistic, shared kind of mood. I take the atmosphere to point to the wholeness of it, but also to you're not in control of it, and once you're in it, it so much becomes the background on the basis of which you experience things and people and events that you can't even picture it some other way. It's like the weather. Anybody still read John Barth's book, The End of the Road? Probably not. But there's this character who's a very Heideggerian character who, when he wakes up in the morning, asks himself what the weather is, which he doesn't mean whether it's raining outside. It means what mood he's in. And it's why is it like the weather and like an atmosphere? Well, it's because when you're in it, you can't even imagine what it would be like not to be in it. So on a rainy day, and cold and so forth, you just can't imagine what it would be like to be in the sun and sort of open and relaxed and enjoying the day. You just can't even picture it. At least that's how I am. And when I'm in a beautiful, warm, sunny situation in which I am relaxed and open to it and enjoying it, I can't picture what it would be like to be on a cold, wet day, sort of shivering and trying to get wherever I'm going as fast as I can. Moods are like that. They're like the weather. They're like the atmosphere. They cover everything, and everything shows up for you on the basis of them. And now comes the fast move, but it's important. They can be shared. They often are shared. Heidegger, I think, thinks they're mostly shared, but the important thing is that they can be shared, because that's the supposed answer to why aren't moods just private representations in a bunch of different people's minds. But let me add one more sentence. It's not only that they can be shared. That wouldn't even make the point, maybe. I just haven't said this before ever in the course, but I've been writing about it. It wouldn't be enough to say that they're shared, because then he could say, well, we all happen to have the same representations right now, namely, let's say that it's a beautiful, comfortable day and a fascinating lecture, everybody on the edge of their seats, and so forth. But what's missing there? Well, not only do you sense the mood and the weather and so forth, not only do you have a shared sense of the mood, the atmosphere, and the weather, but you also share that it's shared. That is, you understand, and in your mood, that everybody has that mood. That's what it would be like to be at this happy, hilarious party. It's not only that you're happy and hilarious, but you're happy that everybody's happy and hilarious. This is the way it is at anything, like a wedding or a funeral or a graduation or just a successful dinner party. The mood is shared, and it's shared that it's shared. And that's double phenomena is what Heidegger's really interested in, and thinks that if you see that phenomena is, I keep wanting to say possible is enough for his argument, that he thinks possible and sort of primitive, that's the sort of most, I don't know what to say, most revealing kind of mood, would be the mood that when you're at a party, you're in the mood of the party, it's a shared mood, and moreover, it's shared that it's a shared mood. That's the most perspicuous kind of mood. That's the phenomena you ought to look at. Then you'll need to account for all the degenerate cases of people having their private moods, and everybody happy at the party but this disgruntled guy in the corner, and we'll worry about that. Yeah.
This doesn't only seem to be the case of business. Go over there.
Oh, I see. Good. Well, it's not a big deal. I mean, it's really just a phenomenological claim. I mean, when he describes what it's like to be at a party, and if he gets it right, and I'm trying to say he does and what he has in mind. You can't say, well, it looks like everybody's happy, and it looks like it's part of their happiness that they're all sharing the happiness. Why would you want to say that? I mean, that's what's happening when you describe it. I mean, what more would you want? I mean, if you're a phenomenologist, I mean, if you're some kind of philosopher who thinks that you've got some deeper truth and that you know, like Descartes, that it couldn't really be like that everybody must have their own private experiences, it's all in inner sense, then you'll need some kind of argument. But Heidegger wants to say just the good old phenomenological thing. And it's sort of the move, first you describe the phenomena, and then if somebody thinks that they've got some other phenomenon or some kind of argument about what kind of beings we really are to show that phenomena couldn't happen, then you'll have to go back and worry about it. But we haven't confronted that kind of argument. We've just confronted a kind of traditional argument that was sort of implicit in Descartes, got brought out by Sartre, for instance, that everyone must have their own private world and their own private mood. And Heidegger wants to say, no, then you'll need more than just an assertion. I'm describing the way moods are public, like atmosphere, like weather, and that's it. Dave. That's right. That's like an atmosphere.
Either outside, quote unquote, or inside, but it rises out.
Okay. Yes, I don't know whether I was going to read it or not. Where is it? People will. Yes, I was going to read it, but that's fine. And I saw another hand. I'm sorry that this seems sort of dismissive, but I'm afraid that's the way a phenomenologist would deal with it. Yeah. Yes. Well, you're right. He's saying, if you can be out of the sync with the overall mood, and Heidegger's going to need to tell you that. And he's going to tell you that, I'll just jump ahead, of course he's going to say, there can be breakdown cases in which the shared mood, it doesn't fit you and you don't fit in, and we'll need to talk about that too, and how that's possible, and that's tricky, because he isn't going to be able to say, well, you're just in a bad mood inside and you're projecting your bad mood on the situation. That would be cheating. He thinks that's unacceptable, unintelligible, hopelessly meaningless thing to say. But then he's got to have a better thing to say, and I don't think we're going to get to it today, but that's all right. Yeah.
In mirror neuron, we're shedding light on the.
Yeah, I think maybe mirror neurons would have a lot to do with it. Now let me think what I want to do. I think. Okay, let me read one more quote and then I will get to mirror neurons, but I'm in the middle of trying to do the publicness. Just a second. Moods can be public and moods are more basic. Well, I can come back to these quotes. So let me say a word about that. I think it's very important that people can have these shared moods and shared that they're shared. And how does that work? Well, Heidegger doesn't need a neuro account, and whether the neuro account turns out to be right or wrong won't destroy his phenomenology if he's got his phenomenology. And let me see, I have to, before we're sort of, I'm trying to say too many things at once. You should bear in mind as you read this that moods are, and this is Heidegger's gimmick, which I'll explain a lot more next time. Moods are attunements. That's the German word, it works better. Stimmung in German, which means mood, is the same word for the tuning of a musical instrument, I think. And so moods are how you are attuned to the situation. You see, I guess I can't do mirror neurons till next time because I want to sort of pull this together. I mean, so if you want to say, well, if moods aren't in you, where are they? Well, moods are what attunes you to the situation as, say, threatening or hilarious or whatever, and the fact that we can sort of resonate is another word too. Resonate to the situation is why we all get into the same mood. See, that's what I wanted to add. How come this atmosphere at the party takes everything over, and everything else being equal, unless you just had a bad grade or gotten into some bad mood? Generally, that would be to have to resist your tendency to get in sync with and get in tune with and resonate to the current shared feeling. Now, I will take up his thing because I got 2 minutes. And now, it may be important that Merleau-Ponty talks about this as intercorporeality and says that it's somehow your body which is attuning you to the current mood and to all the other bodies who are attuned to the mood, and that you're all attuned to the fact that you're all attuned to the mood. That's all something you do by virtue of having a body, Merleau-Ponty says. I think that's probably right. And now, recently, people have discovered what's called mirror neurons, where in apes, or some kind of, what was it, apes? I don't know, chimpanzees, whatever, they discovered that there's neurons that they can plug into, that when the, let's say, monkey sees some other monkey reaching for something, when he sees it, the same neurons fire that would fire if this monkey were reaching for it. That is, your body, your brain, when it takes up the way some other co-species being is acting, gets into that same state. I think the way that when I always explain it to people, it's like yawning. The mirror neurons are, the yawning happens to be a peculiar case in which when you see somebody else doing it, you are impelled to do it. Now, it turns out that luckily we have a lot of inhibitions which keep us from having to, when we see somebody else eating an apple or something, we don't have to grab and eat an apple. But maybe a few neurons are trying and we're just trumping them. But in general, there is the possibility that the brain can just take up something that we see and turn it into something that we do. Just keep thinking of yawning, and then think how yawning can become like an atmosphere, and everybody's in it, and you get attuned to the generally boringness of the situation. And now one comment from you.
We've learned that seeing another person smiling physically.
Right.
Why is it that some people influence and others don't?
Oh. But that's interesting. But let's do the smile, and then we have to stop. It's true, babies, people knew, but they didn't know what to make of it. Merleau-Ponty was constantly pointing out that they didn't know what to make of it, and neither did he. But he knew it was intercorporeality. After a baby a few hours old, if you smile at the baby, it smiles back. And Piaget knew that. But the baby doesn't even know it's got a face and a mouth and everything. How does it do that? And then it turns out if you stick your tongue out at a little baby, it sticks its tongue out back after a few hours. And this is the kind of evidence that there are these mirror neurons. And if you wanted to ask Heidegger, how come this atmosphere happens? How come it perpetuates itself? How come it sort of regenerates itself and you share it and you share that you share it? Well, now we know a little about why that happens, that Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty were smart enough to see, but science hadn't told them anything about how the brain did it. Okay, we won't go on to the understanding part because there's still plenty to say about moods, so I'll erase that. Okay.